Experts warn that Russia's selling of inexpensive petroleum to China and India might undermine EU efforts to cut back on Moscow's oil revenue. With Western sanctions aimed at Russia's energy sector, these two major Asian economies are taking advantage of reduced pricing to shield their population from growing inflation. Additionally, China and India can keep their expenses down by negotiating prices lower than the cap set by Western nations. They also back Russia's combat efforts, which have made little headway in the last year while suffering significant losses. The European Union imposed fresh restrictions just 2 weeks ago to stop Russia from importing refined petroleum products. This action follows the EU's December decision to cease purchasing Russian crude oil. In addition, the G7 has established a global cap on the price of Russian oil supply at $60 per barrel. The EU set a price restriction of $100 per barrel this month for premium oil products like gasoline and diesel. Discount goods, such as fuel oil, are subject to a reduced price cap of $45 a barrel. And now, Russia and India have disclosed a revolutionary and enormous oil alliance that would demolish the G7. If the price caps are exceeded, it could affect the availability of ships, maritime insurance, and other services from EU and G7 regions. These are the products made from Russian oil. This might not be a huge problem, though, as Asian consumers are anticipated to keep buying given that they are now dealing with inflation and the epidemic. Wood Mackenzie's Asia-Pacific Research Director, Sushant Gupta, predicts that China and India would likely process more of the Russian crude that the EU is no longer using. Gupta thinks that by establishing a new market, their purchase of Russian oil will assist balance the world petroleum markets. Furthermore, Indian officials have declared that they will not jeopardize their economy in order to adhere to sanctions spearheaded by the West. The crisis will be handled by market techniques, Indian Oil Minister Hardeep Singh Puri confirmed during India Energy Week, a major industry conference in Bangalore. He emphasized that regardless of location, they will import from trustworthy sources. Furthermore, with only minor oscillations, the Brent and West Texas Intermediate oil futures have stayed steady. A commodities data and analytics company called P.R.O predicts that India would import 1.9 million barrels of Russian crude oil per day in February, setting a new record. According to the data, there has been a notable increase of 35% from the previous month and over 60% since December. This demonstrated the ongoing improvement of ties between the two nations. It is noteworthy that since the EU banned the import of oil, India has emerged as the main importer of Russian crude oil, which is refined into gasoline and diesel. Experts assume that the impending rainy season is the only issue preventing India from acquiring Russian crude. This implies a decline in domestic consumption. They do, however, have faith that India would keep purchasing Russian oil in the future. Additionally, Russia may sell more crude oil to Asia as a result of the EU's decision to stop importing refined fuel from Russia. Pakistan and Bangladesh are two nations that are eager to buy inexpensive oil imports. This year, India is expected to develop at the quickest rate among major economies in the world, while currently importing 85% of its oil. This implies that demand for it will probably rise. India's oil refineries are running at maximum capacity, using cheap Russian crude oil to produce goods for both the domestic market and export to the US and Europe. According to energy analyst Vandana Hari, Indian refineries will continue to make the most use of Russian crude as long as it is practical and affordable. Due to their small markets, Russian oil and oil products are unlikely to be impacted by EU pricing limitations. Additionally, economists believe that the region's need for crude oil would rise significantly as a result of China's reopening. Nevertheless, the anticipated recession in Europe and the US has prevented the expected rise in oil prices brought on by Chinese demand. Depending on the state of the market, the EU may also review the present price caps on Russia's supply of oil and petroleum products. Nonetheless, member state disputes lasted for several months before the current costs were agreed upon. Germany and France opposed significant price reductions that would have harmed the world's energy markets, while Poland sought to get the price down to below production costs. Experts speculate that India's acquisition of Russian oil may have displeased its Western partners, particularly in light of the country's membership in the Quad Security Alliance alongside the US, Australia, and Japan. It seems unlikely, though, that the government of Prime Minister Narendra Modi will cut back on its purchases of inexpensive Russian oil given the impending general elections. The reason for this is that voters may become displeased with price increases as a result. India's retail inflation reached a 3-month high of 6.5% in December, mostly as a result of high food costs. In spite of criticism from Western nations, Nanaskar Tyagarajan, director of Comtrends Risk Management Services, thinks it's critical for the government to control inflation. Furthermore, Tyagarajan recommends that India go forward with Russia and benefit from lower crude oil prices. But because India's purchase of inexpensive crude oil from Russia fits with the G7's objectives, the US recently praised the move. Based on Assistant State Secretary P.R.O's visit to New Delhi on December 16 to 17, the US views India as a key partner in the shift to renewable energy. The two nations are looking into a number of strategies to improve their cooperation in areas including civil nuclear energy and green hydrogen. According to P.R.O, India is currently saving $15 a barrel on the cost of its imports of Russian crude oil. India is acting in its own best interests by haggling for the best deal, which is consistent with the G7 coalitions and our G7 plus partners' objectives to reduce Russian revenue. P.R.O underlined how important it is to understand that the current state of affairs is not transient. Furthermore, regular relations with Russia cannot be restored as long as Putin continues his hostile acts. Since several Western countries declined to buy Russian oil as a form of retaliation for Moscow's invasion of Ukraine, India is now purchasing inexpensive oil from Russia. With the United States and China included, this places India as the world's third largest importer of oil. The G7 put a cap on the amount of money that nations might pay Russia for oil procurement, starting in December, at $60 per barrel. Preventing Moscow from making undue profits from its oil exports is the aim. P.R.O, the former US ambassador to Ukraine, thinks that Putin's actions have cost Europe a significant market. Additionally, it prompted more Europeans to spend money on safer and greener energy sources. In addition, he said he was pleased with India's position on these issues and reaffirmed his commitment to keeping in touch with the Indian government. And he plans to keep up this conversation in his next discussions. India came in second to China in terms of the amount of crude oil that Russia shipped this year, according to Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak, who made the announcement today on state TV. According to Novak, China today purchases between 45% and 50% of Russia's oil and gasoline exports, with India receiving about 40% of the total. The rise is especially noteworthy for India, as up until 2022, Russia barely exported any oil there. It is currently the top supplier in the subcontinent. By the end of this year, we expect this share to have fallen to 4 to 5%, stated Novak, whereas earlier we exported around 40 to 45% of our total crude oil and refined products to Europe. According to the data, China has supplanted Europe as the primary destination for Russian crude and oil products. Another deputy PM stated last week that Russia's oil exports are expected to increase by 7% this year compared to 2021 levels. The majority of last year's urgent issues have been fixed. This is about payments and cargo insurance in the first place, and it's also about making sure that the tanker fleet is able to transport hydrocarbons over the seas, according to Alexander Belousov. The head of Transneft, Nikolai Tokarev, revealed last week that the amount of Russian oil supplies to China this year has increased to almost 100 million tons, or 2 million barrels per day. The amount of goods exported to China and India has multiplied several times over. Tokarev stated, "I can say that this year, roughly 70 million tons of oil were sent to India, whereas about 100 million tons went to China." In November, however, 1.6 million barrels of Russian crude were imported into India, marking a 4-month high, according to data Reuters received from trade sources. More than one-third of India's crude oil imports for the month of November came from Russia, which was 3.1% more than the country imported in October. What are your thoughts on Russia selling its oil to India at a discounted price? Let me know down below. If you want to continue to learn about business investing and financial education, we have got this video waiting on the screen for you to check out. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.